What's up, DIY Nation? I have 6 tips that might help you along your journey when installing LifeProof vinyl planks. So let's get into it. Welcome to YOUFLOOR Flooring Tips and Tricks. I'm your host, Zanone Hunt. LifeProof vinyl planks from Home Depot seems to be a pretty popular subject right now. We as installers are installing a lot of this LifeProof vinyl planks, and I think you should go do your research on this product before you put it in. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's not for you, who knows, but you should know everything about it as far as that goes. But as far as installation goes and tips, I've installed this stuff on quite a few installs. If you're going to install this stuff yourself, maybe these tips will help you. So let's get into it. Okay, so when you're putting these planks in, the tapping block that you would use to install laminate is not always the ideal tapping block for installing LifeProof vinyl planks. As you can see, when we zoom in and slow it down, the tapping block can tend to slip off the plank. This can damage the face of the board and you'll have to pull it and start over. So if you just cut a small piece of flooring and use it as your tapping block, it slides right into the grooves, and it generally takes one tap of your hammer to get it to lay down flat, making installation very smooth. The cutoff tapping block is great for ensuring that these cracks get closed tight. Often when you install these boards, it can feel like they are in all the way, but when you use a cutoff tapping block, you can hear and feel it click in, and you'll know it's fully seated. When you're cutting out holes for vents, it's often easy to do when you cut the piece to length. You can just mark to the edges, use a speed square to straighten it, or a scrap piece of flooring if you don't have a speed square. And then of course you just measure from the face of the board to the hole and make your mark. You can cut this with a table saw or a jigsaw. It makes for a pretty accurate fit, but it involves 2 steps. So if you want to be efficient when cutting these vents out, what I like to do is go ahead and place the board against the wall, mark the edge where the other board is, and that'll determine my length. And now in order to get a precise mark to where these vents must start, I'm going to slide this board over to where the edges are. I don't want to mark it at the top, so make sure you're marking the right side. Remember, this will be flipped over. So you're going to want to put the edge of your board at the edge of the vent hole, and then come to the edge of the board that is right next to it and make a little mark. Now you'll slide it over to the other edge of the vent hole and make another slight mark. Now you'll square those up and make sure that they are straight. Then you'll just simply measure from the face of the board to the edge of the vent hole and mark that measurement there. I like to use my speed square, it's just convenient. Now tip number 3 is a great one. It's easy to install planks when you're out in the open field. You can just tip them up at a 30-40 degree angle and click them in. But when you have to go underneath the jamb, you can't always tip it up because the trim's got you locked in. So I take a scrap piece and slide it up underneath the board, and that'll put the board at a slight angle. I put my foot down on the crack so that the tongue goes into the groove right there, and just tap it one time. And generally that gets it in pretty good and tight. And of course I do the same thing on the other side. As you can see, this board is not exactly tight yet, although it can seem like it is. So I put the piece underneath there, put my tapping block in, and one tap, and voila, it's tight. Now this one can be a tricky one. When you're having to install planks up against a wall, or in my case, a glass shower, you can't always just put a tapping block in there and smack it with a hammer. I could break the glass. So I take my cutoff piece, slip it in the grooves, and I grab one of these things called a pull bar, and in my case, we call them a situation bar because we only use them when we get into a situation. But I lock the tongue into the groove, slip the pull bar onto it, and smack it. And as you can see, just like we did in the tip number 3, it tightens those cracks up really nice. Nice. It's not always easy to visualize what the piece is going to look like, so I like to click one in above it, and that pretty much gives me a picture of what my board is supposed to look like when it's installed. I measure from the wall back to the edge, and I mark that number. And then I measure from the edge to where the trim starts, and that gives me a good indication of where the trim starts. Then I like to measure from the face of it to where I want the piece to slide underneath the jamb, which is typically about 1/4 of an inch. And then just to double check that, I'll measure from the face of the board up against it to the jamb and make sure that adding 1/4 inch lands where I just put my mark. Looks about perfect. Then I draw that line straight across. Now to get the mark from the other side of the wall, I just mark my tape to where I want it to be and measure back from the factory edge and make that mark there. And I just join the two pieces together. And again, using the tip we gave earlier, you can just slide a piece up underneath the jamb. That'll pick your board up for you, or in this case, sometimes you don't need it if you're not locking into another board on the other side. We're only locking in on one side, whereas the other side is up against a wall. And that should make for a pretty good fit. All right, so when you're having to install round pipes, I like to take the measuring up against one side to the center of the pipe and cut my piece out. It's always better to install these in two pieces, that way you can lock them in together. It's not always the case where you can just drill a hole and slip it over the pipe with all of the hardware already there. If this was new construction, we can do that. So I measure from the wall back to the factory edge, and that'll give me the number for the other piece. Now that I have my two pieces cut that are split right at the pipe, I measure off the baseboard to the center of the pipe, allowing 1/4 of an inch for expansion. And that, when I lock them together, will be the center of my circle. I just freehand it. You can grab something and put it around, but the scotia will cover most of it anyway. Then with the two pieces cut, you just lay them in and lock them in. That's it, guys. I hope you learned something today. I hope something that I showed you will come in handy when you go to install your project of LifeProof vinyl planks by Home Depot. If you got any questions, leave them in the comments. And also, hey, don't forget, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that way you can be notified anytime I put out another video. And also, hit a like on this one. That'll help with the YouTube algorithm and also helps our channel grow. And for those of you who have already subscribed, I do appreciate it. Thank you a lot. It makes me excited. All right, so until next time, we'll talk to you later.